And I guess a good way to start this conversation is just to thank you again, Mariam, for coming over today, which again, I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. Thanks for the
Oh,
time.
thank you. No, thank you so much for having me. It's great. It's so exciting to speak with you.
Thank you, thank you. Look, so I have a couple people before, and we talked about the Blue Marble Institute, Space Institute, and maybe some people, again, who are watching this episode, maybe heard that a couple of times through those episodes. But maybe we can talk about it a little bit more, because I know you're working on some cool projects there currently. So maybe you can give us more details what you're currently working on.
Yeah, for sure. So the Blue Marble Space Institute of Science is based in the US. It's a nonprofit organization, and it aims to bring together the scientific research community, but also to showcase the amazing work that these researchers are doing through different activities like science communication. I'm a visiting scholar with the institution. So the way that program works is you reach out to a research scientist that's affiliated with Blue Marble, and you propose a project you want to work on. So my mentor is actually Dr. Graham Lau, and we work on science communication projects. So that's pretty exciting. And I can go into more details on what that involves if you'd be interested.
Yes, please. Like as we spoke off the record before we started recording, we said this is kind of where the space industry right now in that phase. Like there has to be done a lot of the science communication, and we kind of see that everything when before the COVID started, and I had so many of these conversations privately or here in the podcast with astrophotographers or people who became part of the space industry through, again, science communication or something like that. So we see this momentum kind of going towards, this beautiful place, but eventually everybody go back to normal. And of course, that's good with this kind of COVID situation. But we need to continue to build that momentum for a lot of people to understand that space is open for everybody. There are opportunities to participate and maybe work full time and kind of in a startup or, in an established company. So can you give us, again, that kind of recipe that with Graham, well, of course, I had him on the show. He's a tremendous.
Oh, you did? Nice. That's
human.
So exciting.
Yes.
I really like working with him. Yes. He's a tremendous person. Yes, indeed. So the thing I'm doing with Blue Marble, firstly, let me rewind back and talk about science communication and the importance of that. I totally agree with you. I think it is so important to communicate science in a manner that is accessible to the public, that conveys these scientific discoveries in a way that's exciting and accessible, both of those things. And broadly across different platforms. So you talked about social media and how everything's getting very digital and online right now. So we see a lot of interesting ways that people are creating videos, creating content to spread this science widely. And I think that is really amazing. It's a very accessible entry point for a lot of people to bring their diverse skill sets to this industry of space, right? To start working on science communication, communicating their love and passion for space. In terms of what I'm doing right now, I'm supporting the Ask an Astrobiologist show. So this is something that Graham, as you mentioned, hosts along with the NASA Astrobiology Institute. So just a lot of live production help during the show. We'll be screening questions from the audience. And the show brings on an astrobiologist once a month. And they talk about their science, they talk about the projects they're involved in. It's sort of very fun and interactive because you allow the audience to ask questions in real time, and that also helps to guide the conversation. And my part is just making sure that that link between the audience interaction and our hosts is very smooth. We also sometimes provide suggestions on interesting guests that we could bring onto the show. So it's been pretty great. And I think in general, the Blue Marble community is very welcoming. It's a great network of scientists and peers that I really enjoy being a part of.
That's amazing. So what about your own personal career path? Because you didn't started this with the end in goal, or maybe you did. You was I want to work with these people, or how did it turn out to be for you, this opportunity that you have now?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question because my journey was not very straight or linear, as you mentioned. And so I do the visiting scholar stuff, but on the side, I'm also collaborating on research with a scientist at NASA Goddard. So I have my hand in a few projects too. But yeah, so how did I get to this point? It's a bit of a long story, but I'm happy to share that, and you can ask questions along the way. So I actually started out doing an undergrad in electrical engineering at UT Austin. I'm originally from Pakistan, so I moved to the US to pursue my degree. And at that time, I knew that I was always interested in science fiction, and I was reading and thinking about space, but it wasn't really presented as a career option to me in my country because we don't really have like an active like human spaceflight program. There's not very many like aerospace engineering jobs over there, you know? So I did electrical engineering, and I was still thinking about space on the side because around that time, when I was doing my undergrad, SpaceX was starting to take off and you could like see in the news, interesting stuff happening. I would go to career fairs, and back then new space wasn't so big. So there weren't like so many small startups doing interesting things in space. It was mostly like, you know, NASA, the space agencies, and the big aerospace primes. So I would go to career fairs and I would talk to them, but being international, there was always that roadblock, right? That, oh, we're just going to be hiring US citizens. And so I was in Texas, and I decided to do the second most interesting thing at that time for me, which was to go work in the oil and gas industry, which is very booming in Texas. There's a lot of jobs there, but also my dad had worked in that industry. So I had seen like, and he was drilling, like he was a real-time going on the rig field engineer. So we would be traveling to all these countries because he'd be working on the oil rigs there. So I thought of that as like a very exciting job, and I always wanted to travel. I didn't really think how hard it would be, but yeah, I applied to that company, and I applied for a program called Tech and Field. It was a rotation program. So you spend a year and a half in an international location on an oil rig, and then a year and a half in the product center. And I was sent to Russia. So I worked in Sakhalin. It's an island, it's very remote. And I didn't even know it existed until I got assigned to that island. So I show up there, and it was a complete culture shock for me going from the US to Russia, like the culture, the language barrier, it was very different. And I think that was a time when I learned a lot about myself. It was very mentally and physically demanding job, doing real-time drilling and measurements on the rig. Yeah, even the climate is pretty challenging. There's a lot of isolation. There's not very many women on the rig. So even though our company would send like an equal split of engineers that were female and male, our team was small, like 4 people, right? And then the rest of the rig, like 70 to 100 people, were from Russia, and they were all rig hands, like they were men, basically. They were all very nice, but yeah, you could feel that like very male dominated, like you have to be tough environment, you know? So I'll never forget that time. So that happened. Then I moved back to Houston. I was in the manufacturing center with the same company. I was getting very, very specialized in oil and gas drilling technology. But in 2016, there was a downturn. So the price of oil was crashing, and the whole industry was suffering a lot. There was a lot of layoffs. And so I moved to Canada, and I'm currently in Toronto. I did my master's in business. So this whole time, like, I was still interested in space, but I didn't think I could make a career out of it. Like I didn't really know what could I do in space, right? After that initial sort of challenge being international and trying to get in. So I'm in Canada now. I did my master's in business, still not thinking about space as a career, you know? And then I'm like, okay, I want to do something in emerging technologies. So I ended up joining a quantum computing startup, and I was helping them with business development. Then I was at a Canadian bank looking at emerging technologies. And when I was at the bank, I was very fortunate because they were sending me to a lot of conferences on things like blockchain, on startups, different innovation topics. And I would listen to speakers that were leading their startup. And I was very inspired by female entrepreneurs. So I would hear them pitching about their startup, what they're doing. And afterwards, I would ask them for a coffee and ask, like, how did you know that this is what you want to do? I think I was kind of in that stage where I'm trying to figure out my career, right? So I'm like, why did you want to work in blockchain? Or why do you care so much about this AI technology you're building? How did you know this was what you want to dedicate your career to? And in these conversations with one such individual, she said, well, space came out somehow. I don't know how she brought it out of me, but she did. And she's like, I can see your eyes are shining when you talk about this. So why don't you do this? And I was like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't even know what is happening in Canada in space. I have no clue where to start. And she was really nice. She connected me to one of her friends, and she said, this is my friend. She's a lawyer, but she also arranged a space summit here in Canada. So you should talk to her. And it was that conversation with that one person who pretty much like opened that door, right? She's like, okay, these are some startups you should look at. These are some things happening in Canada. Let me know if you need more help. And from there, I just kept on talking to more people. So I started reaching out to people on LinkedIn. I connected with people at the Canadian Space Agency in industry. And it was a lot of cold calling and networking, to be honest, and putting myself out there to understand the landscape in Canada. And so my entry point, and I started volunteering a lot. So we can talk about some of that too. Like I was with SGAC, with SEDS. I also started helping with the World Space Week Association. And during this time, I learned that there were so many opportunities in space. Like it was unbelievable how commercialized it was getting. I didn't know space policy and law was a thing. I didn't know there were like jobs for people doing marketing, business development, and oh my gosh, like so big, this economy. It was a bit mind-blowing for me. And so through some of my volunteering work, I was connected to a space consulting firm in Canada. And I didn't even know that was a thing. Again, like people are doing consulting in space, okay. So I interviewed with them and I started working with them on projects for the Canadian Space Agency, but very much on the economic, strategic, financial side of things. And I was now leveraging my business degree, in fact, right, to do those types of projects. And I learned a lot. It was very interesting. But ultimately, I realized that I didn't just want to be doing the commercial stuff in space. And I wanted to somehow leverage my technical background. So now that I had entered the sector, I was trying to figure out what should my role be in the industry? And that was around the time that I started attending conferences and workshops on planetary science and astrobiology and connecting with Graham, who's also an astrobiologist, and kind of understanding like, what are some of the options available? And I wanted to ask some of the big questions. I didn't want to be an engineer in space either. I wanted to think about things like, is there life beyond Earth, which is sort of the field of astrobiology in many ways, right? And so interdisciplinary. And I didn't know, again, that that was something that existed. It was very, very fascinating to me to learn about people who are working on this topic. And so, again, I started reaching out to a lot of people at NASA and at institutions, trying to understand what kind of work they do as astrobiologists and what kind of training did they receive, what kind of educational background did they have, what advice do they have for someone interested in this topic. And that's how I connected with Graham and started working with him. And that's also how I connected with my mentor at Goddard and helping him with research. And that's kind of where I'm at today. So it's been a very winding journey.
The journey still continues. I mean, and it
yeah, I think so.
Yes. That's amazing. So like, what advice would you give for the people? Like, you know, in life, we need to get lucky sometimes. So maybe somebody gets lucky when they meet the right people and that person directs to another person, just like in your story. But of course, you put yourself out there, you know, you do that yourself. But what about the people who maybe watched or listened to a couple of these podcast episodes and they feel like they want to do something in the space industry, but they live in a very maybe remote places, or they're, you know, they're ladies. So like, what would you tell them when it comes to that kind of personal career path? How do you take that?
Yeah, I would say you have to be very brave and courageous, like, especially when you're trying to enter a new industry. It's very hard because, especially for me, space in Canada, it's a bit like a black box. The community is quite small. I mean, relatively, it's not like so small either, but yeah, it's a bit niche. And once you enter, you know everyone though. Like it's kind of like a small community where everyone knows everyone else. But if you're on the outside, you don't really know how to break in or how to start or who to talk to, right? You have to do the groundwork. You have to reach out to people. So be brave. Don't be scared to email people that you do not know. Use LinkedIn to your advantage. And what's the worst that can happen? People might say no, or they might not respond, but that's okay. Like, don't take it personally, because I realized when I was reaching out to people that almost 80% of them said yes, and they were even willing to have a call with me. So you would be surprised, like how many people are actually willing to encourage this interest and give advice. And it just starts from there. Like you said, it's a snowball effect. So no one gets lucky immediately. Like I faced a lot of rejections. It took me, to give you some context, I was working full-time at the bank, and it took me almost 6 to 8 months to get my first job in the space sector, the consulting one. It didn't happen like the next day. I applied to a lot of companies. I spoke to a lot of people. I got a lot of rejections. I got a lot of like no answers either. And it can start getting discouraging. Like, to be honest, I think around the 6-month mark, I was like, is this going to work for me? Am I ever going to be able to work in this sector? Because I also started getting impatient, right? For me, 6 months was already like, oh no, like I'm not seeing any interest. is this going to work? But I kept on pushing, right? Like that's the key, like keep on persevering. Sometimes the last person standing is the one who wins, like if you don't give up, right?
Yeah.
And so luckily, like, yeah, I found that opportunity. I was connected by someone I was working with, and she was kind enough to say to the managing director of that company that you should talk to this candidate. I think she has the skills you're looking for, you know, because the other thing in space is that, yes, it's really a booming economy, but a lot of the opportunities work through networking. Fortunately or unfortunately, you might be the best candidate and you might be submitting your resume. And sometimes there's so many other candidates interested in the few opportunities out there that if you have some kind of personal connection, you may have worked with the person or they can refer you. That makes a huge difference. I feel it's probably the same for a lot of industries, but especially in space, I found that a lot of the opportunities are through you putting yourself out there, you making that connection, and you having that network that's willing to back you up and open those doors for you.
So what would you say for the people who are a little bit more shy, just like myself, who are introverts, they cannot go and talk, like really, I'm an introvert, you know, but still
really?
At the same time, I can be an extrovert when I want to, and when I have to, when I need to. But look, how people can put themselves out there if they're a little bit more shy, introverted, but they want to be in the space industry. Because maybe Mariam, she's tough. She's been working in Russia, a old rig. She can handle it.
Gosh.
What about other people?
No, I thank you for your kind words. I'm not like super tough either. I have to be honest, I'm a bit of an introvert too on the inside. I actually did the personality test a while back. Some of my friends sent it to me. And it's like 50-50. It's like 50% introvert, 50% extrovert. I had to overcome that. Like, to be honest, when I was first doing my undergrad and earlier in my career, I was very, I guess I wouldn't say scared, but uncomfortable talking to strangers. And I feel like as an engineer, you're not really trained in how to network or socialize or communicate with people to build your career. It's not really encouraged or taught formally. And so a lot of my early career, I wasn't really doing this kind of stuff. In fact, what helped me was sort of the formal training I got through the MBA, because it's really funny in the business world, they put so much emphasis on networking. They literally taught us, it's called a coffee chat. Like this, they have a term, like you spend 30 minutes or so over coffee with someone and they teach you how to reach out to them on LinkedIn. So for me, actually that formal training on how to do a coffee chat and the etiquettes and how to reach out to people, it really helped. So maybe even like Googling something like that, like how to do a coffee chat, how to reach out to someone, how to do a cold call, what kind of questions to ask. And even to this day, even though I've done so many calls like this, I have to be honest, it's not like I just walk in and I'm so comfortable. I get nervous. Like I still feel some of that inhibition towards talking to strangers, or it's kind of like you're putting yourself out there, right? Like maybe a little bit like, oh, what if I say something wrong, or I don't come across like I've done enough research. So what really helps me is being really over prepared. Even to this day, every single call I have with someone, I spend 30 minutes, sometimes 1 hour preparing for that call. Like, I'm serious. I have a list of questions. Like, I prepare a format. I do research on them, like their affiliation, their background, and I write down the questions I'm going to ask, and I have it on my phone. So when I go in the call, like, there's never a moment where I'm not prepared. Like, I know what I want to ask them, and it really helps me feel confident in that call. So that's something that helps me. And there's different techniques like this, but I would say you have to start somewhere. Growth happens when you push yourself into an uncomfortable situation. So I know it's going to be a bit intimidating, especially when you get some rejections and people are like not responding or don't want to talk to you, but don't take it personally. Keep on trying. And when you get that call, definitely prepare. Like for me, that helps. Do the things that help you feel comfortable, right? Yeah. I'd like to be over prepared.
Yeah, that's a really great rule, you know, because I think as we spoke about going an extra mile, that's how you're going to build the confidence in yourself. That's going to give you this, you know, then you can speak freely, then you can become an extrovert because you always going an extra mile and you're just being prepared. But yeah, I do encourage for people to do the same, just not to take it personally and just keep persevering, because sometimes, you know, the CEOs that you're connecting and you're like being offended, why the CEO is not responding to me? Because he's a CEO,
They're so busy.
He might be busy. Yeah, exactly. So it takes time, but like, When it comes to finding mentors, like, can you talk about that again, the mentor that you find in the Goddard? So can you talk about how have you found him or her, and what are the benefits, and when people should go and look for one?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I feel like I can talk a little bit more about that in detail with regards to other mentors I've had as well. So I have mentors both within the space sector and outside. And again, I feel like prior to entering the space sector, it kind of happened very organically. Like typically it's people you work with, like your supervisor or a colleague that's more senior that sees potential in you, and you start like maybe talking about different things happening on the job or career progression or their advice. And that's kind of, so my first mentor, I would say, in my career was actually the supervisor I worked with at Dell. So I did an internship at Dell when I was an electrical engineer, and it was in my third year of college. And that person really helped me a lot during that internship and when I was troubleshooting things, and they really encouraged me to become a better engineer. And so that mentorship relationship was formed at that point. And sometimes I still keep in touch and I send him a message. It's been over 9 years, but you know, if you have someone like that, it doesn't hurt to send an email every once in a while to keep them updated on your career. Because at the time that I was applying for MBAs, he actually wrote me a recommendation letter. So it had already been 4 to 5 years since I had worked with him, but he was willing to vouch for me when I was applying to master's programs, right? So maintain that relationship. Yeah, and then most recently when I joined space, at the time I was at the bank, I had a mentor who was a director at the bank, and he could tell that I was really interested in space, and he really encouraged this interest. So he told me to go for it. And to this day, we stay connected. So even though he's not in the industry, it's okay, because there's people who recognize your passions and can help you more generally with career development and advice. And there was even a point, like I want to say a year ago, where I was faced with the decision to continue down the space route or to go back to like working at a bank or working at a technology company. And it was in fact this mentor, the director at the bank, the former director at the bank, now he works at a pension plan. He said to me, Mariam, don't give up on space. He's not even in the sector, but he said, don't give up, because there's very few people who find what they want to do in their life and have the opportunity to do it. And you have that chance right now. So, you know, keep on trying, keep on trying. And he's provided a lot of support in that manner to encourage my interest, right? And also like helping with recommendation letters and such. And then there's the mentor who connected me to my first job in space, who's actually a space lawyer. She's a professor and she looks at space law and governance. And we've collaborated on papers and we've stayed connected, and she's opened a lot of doors for me in terms of opportunities in space. And then most recently, Graham, I think of him as a wonderful mentor at Blue Marble. He's been very encouraging of my interest in astrobiology. And all of this sort of, it happened not like I'm asking someone and saying, will you be my mentor? You know, like I used to wonder, how do you find a mentor? Do you just go up to someone and say, can you be my mentor? It doesn't really work like that. Like typically, you're connected to someone, you may work with them, you collaborate on something, or they're your boss or supervisor. And that's how that sort of relationship organically forms. That's how these relationships have formed. And then with the scientists at Goddard, I had reached out to him after I heard his presentation on his research. So he was talking about what he does. And again, I sent a cold email. I didn't really know him. And I said, I'm interested in your work. Can we set up a call? And then in the call, I expressed more interest. I'd done my research and I asked him, can I help you with your research? Like I'm looking for opportunities to collaborate. And I had again been asking people for, I want to say 6 months at least, similar. And I kept on getting no's. They were like, no, you need to have a PhD to work with us, or they just don't respond, or yeah, it's not a good fit right now. Let's stay in touch, stuff like that, right? But if you keep on you don't give up, keep on trying, because there might be that one person who says yes, and that changes everything for you, right? You don't need everyone you reach out to say yes. And so Mark was really great. He said, yeah, let's work together. And we've been collaborating since then. It's been like almost half a year now. And I help him, it's scientific research now with modeling the ice shell compositions of ocean worlds, because he's an astrobiologist, he works on ocean worlds. And one of my main interests in astrobiology was thinking about the potential for life on ocean worlds. So it kind of really all fit together very well. And I've just learned so much from him. It's opened up other opportunities in terms of attending research group meetings at different labs at JPL. And he's basically supported a lot of my career development on the scientific side. And this sort of also happened pretty organically with me working with him then, like him taking me under his like, you know, mentorship wing and taking a chance on me, seeing my motivation, and then us working together continuously to the point where now, like, if I need tips on something, he will respond to me and say, okay, maybe look at this, maybe we should present your work at this conference, stuff like that, you know. But beyond that, beyond these organic relationships, I want to highlight 2 structured mentorship programs that are really great, especially for women in space. So there's also ways to apply for mentors. I didn't know this, but there are mentorship programs. So I had applied for the UNOSA Space for Women, a mentorship program, which is really great for women who are looking to enter the space sector, change their careers in space. And so I got paired with a mentor there, and this was formal. So this individual had many mentees, including myself. She would set up seminars every month for us with different women professionals and scientists, etc., in the space sector. And that was 1-year program. So that was very informative for me as well. And then I applied for another formal mentorship program called the IAF Launchpad Mentorship Program. And with that, it's also a formal mentorship. The batch I applied to was the inaugural cohort of this program. And this is open to everyone. So male, female, anyone in space, right? It's a competitive process, and they connect you with leaders in the space sector. So they had around 8 or so high-profile professionals in the space sector who were part of IAF that you get matched with based on your application. So the mentor I got was a former astronaut. So that was incredible. Like, that was mind-blowing. I never thought I would have an astronaut for a mentor, you know, and like talking to her, we had 4 hours that we were formally going to connect through this program. So they set expectations, right, in these formal mentorship programs that every month you're going to connect for 1 hour. Those were some really life-changing conversations for me in terms of providing guidance on the career path to take, and looking at things more strategically and long-term plans, and just hearing about her journey. It was pretty incredible. So my advice there is, like, apply for everything, like everything you're interested in. Don't hold back, just apply for those programs. Because I never knew I would get selected and I would have like an astronaut mentor. That's like incredible, right? Who would have thought?
That's amazing. That's amazing. So like, what is the way to do, as you talked about the volunteering? Can you give some advice for people, like what opportunities are out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started out volunteering in space. So one of the first organizations I was working with was called the World Space Week Association. And I just reached out again. I reached out on their website. There was contact information. I sent an email and I said, can I help you out? And it started from there. So I was basically helping them manage reaching out for sponsorships for their upcoming World Space Week event. And it was a little bit of work. Like, it was not like there's nothing to do. There's quite a bit, actually. So that's the thing with volunteering. Make sure that you don't overcommit yourself. I felt like in the beginning, I was doing so much volunteering. Like, I joined World Space Week. I was with SEDS, helping them to organize the hackathon in Canada. I was with SGAC. I was pretty much doing everything because I wanted to know everything that was happening in space, and I wanted to meet a lot of people. And volunteering is a really good entry point, but I'm a very responsible person. So the commitments I take on, like, I need to fulfill them. But then I was also doing a full-time job. So I felt like I kind of spread myself really thin. So my advice for volunteering for people is definitely do it, but do it for, like, make sure you vet the organizations, you vet the role, and you're honest with yourself about how much time you can commit, and honest with them as well. And there's different types of volunteering structures, right? There are organizations where there are more senior people who are overseeing your work. Then there's like peer-to-peer volunteer organizations like SGAC, like SEDS, right? Where you work with people that are typically in your own age group and you're working on projects and collaborating. So make sure that, like, you know, you can explore a few options and see what works for you. Ultimately, the organization should speak to your values. It should be something you really care about, because you are working for free. Volunteering is working for free, right? And your time is valuable too. So make sure you understand what personal and professional goals you want out of this, and how can you get that, and maybe also communicate it to the people you're working with, right? Like, make sure that there's a little bit of a plan around it. And another thing is, don't be afraid to walk away. Like, at the end of the day, if things change, priorities change, you might have more workload at your job, right? Your full-time job. Something else happens in your life. It's okay to step back from volunteering too. From personal experience, like I took on a lot and I felt like I was getting a little bit burnt out. So I sometimes have to take a step back and, think about those commitments and which ones are the ones that I'm going to have to unfortunately stop at this point, and which ones are the ones that I want to continue contributing my time to.
Perfect. So when we talk about contributing the time and coming back to the kind of science communication, which again, it's could be an easy entry point for a lot of people who want to pursue, their careers in the space industry, or just, just doing it because it matters, right? So what would you recommend for people if they have that kind of, they want to, speak about the science? Because again, there's a lot of different topics, and you pick one, which is astrobiology. So what would you recommend for people when it comes to finding that? They know they want to talk about space, but it's just too many, topics to talk about. So how they can find where they can be the best at?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Ultimately, do things you're passionate about. So whatever topic you want to talk about in space, make sure it's something you care about, that you want to do research on, that you're interested in committing your time to. So that could be anything, right? Like, and it could also drive on the skill sets you already have. So say you come from like a business background, maybe you want to talk about investments in space or venture capital or different fundraising models. Like, I think what a lot of people don't realize is there's so many transferable skills that you can bring to any industry. So definitely draw on your previous strengths as well. And for me, like I keep on changing into completely new topics, but I knew I wanted to do something that was thinking about life beyond Earth, right? That's what led me to astrobiology. Like definitely keep an eye out for your instincts and your passions, and then work towards that, because that will make it easier. Like I'm not a science communication expert by any means, right? But when I see people who are doing great science communication, I see that they typically draw on strengths they already have. They talk about things they're really passionate about. They do a lot of due diligence and research online and looking at scientific papers and condensing it into formats that are accessible to the public. But I think it always starts with interest. And it also starts with seeking guidance. So if you're new to this, reach out to people who are established science communicators. Explain that you want to enter this, I guess, sub industry or this profession, and tell them like, you need advice, or these are some challenges you're facing. Can they connect for a call, or even over email if they have some tips? Like one of the easiest ways to do something new is to look at people who inspire you, who are already doing that, and ask them how they got there and what tips do they have. Because I'm pretty sure they went through the same journey as you at some point, where they were thinking, what should I do science communication on? Or I don't know, like, how do I start doing this? Or what are some resources to communicate science better? Are there workshops? Are there conferences for science communicators? And there are. Like, I don't know all of them, but if you start Googling like science communication workshop or organizations, like you'll probably start finding communities that you can start joining, right, to develop these skills.
That's very good advice. All I can say is that's very good advice. So again, I know that you're a little bit far off from now. Again, you're in Toronto, right, in Canada. So, but maybe you can talk about what's currently happening in Pakistan. Are you planning to do any work in there when it comes to science communication or astrobiology? And where do you think is the future going to be for Pakistan?
I would say that I could not comment too much because I don't stay 100% up to date, but I do have some friends that are doing really amazing stuff in Pakistan that I keep in touch with through Blue Marble. There's a friend of mine who is working on science communication initiatives in her university. She's also interested in astrobiology. So she also, I believe, teaches students some of these topics. And there's another individual at SGAC, the national point of contact for Pakistan, who's very active, who has her own organization as well, communicating science to the younger students. So I think looking at people like that and staying in touch with them is my connection to Pakistan right now. And I get very inspired to see that they have so much passion about space and they want to communicate it to younger people, right? Like the next generation. So I see a lot of promise. I see a lot of talent in Pakistan. I see people doing really cool things and wanting to communicate that passion to the next generation. So in terms of like their space program or government initiatives, I couldn't speak much, but I do feel like personally, I have to say that emerging countries, right? Emerging space nations, like Pakistan, which doesn't really have a human spaceflight program today, right? But I truly feel like when we think about exploring the moon and then going deeper and deeper into space, we are going to see more and more capabilities that eventually develop in these other countries, right? Because space is the future, right? So everyone needs to be on the table. Like, it's not, if you want to have an inclusive future in space, it shouldn't just be the developed space nations, it shouldn't just be US and Russia and China and the big players deciding. Like, we need even the emerging countries that are thinking about a future in space to be at the table to help define what that would look like. So I see that the future for space is bright overall. Like, in my country and other countries, like, it has to be, because personally, I believe that's going to be the next big economy, like the in-space economy, when humanity is in space. Maybe it's not going to happen tomorrow, but I do feel like in the coming decades, the trend that, you know, LEO is getting commercialized. NASA's handing off like ISS to like commercial entities to take care of that. We're thinking about the moon. Like, as we expand deeper and deeper into space, which I really hope will happen more and more in my lifetime, we're going to see a lot of countries start to think about how to contribute to that new economy.
Yeah, exactly. So this is exactly what I want to see in the future as well, because this is going to be the great future. As I mentioned that a couple of times before, if you guys and girls who are listening and watching this episode, if you're going to go or just Google JPL and space science innovations that came through space travel, I mean, a lot of things that we take for granted today, you know, these things and, you know, technology came through space exploration. So we definitely need to continue to do that. So, but talking about, again, going a little bit further from Pakistan into maybe one of these things that we have behind me, one of these planets. So do you feel like there's something out there already? Again, looking as astrobiologists, starting from a kind of, you know, microbial form in one of these planets?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I was looking at the astrobiology community and where the discussion was at, I was intrigued by a few different angles. So I realized that exoplanets, you know, it's fairly an emerging field. I think it's the first one was detected somewhere in the early 1990s. So exoplanets are planets orbiting other stars beyond the sun, right? And they've discovered thousands of them already, right? So this has really caused the community to sort of expand in interest, thinking about what are the atmospheres of these exoplanets like? What is their composition? Could they potentially be supporting life? And a lot of people are trying to answer that question and think about next generation telescope concepts like LUVOIR, and what kind of spectroscopic signatures should they be looking for in these atmospheres? And is there potentially another Earth-like exoplanet out there? We don't know, right? Like, this is all up in the air, not known kind of science right now, which is very exciting. So that's one kind of subfield where they're thinking about conditions for habitability and what do these exoplanets look like? How do we characterize them? Because there's so much we don't know. But in terms of life potentially, yeah, personally, I feel like it would be such a shame. Yeah, I really feel like the probabilities are it would be very strange if in all of this universe with billions of stars, it's just us, right? And then they have the Drake equation where they think about, you know, basically like, okay, there's like intelligent life, and then like, is it producing technological signals, and what kind of probabilities would you need to see to have that kind of, you know, number of species that might exist out there. But truly, I believe that it is probably a matter of time. The universe is so vast, there must be life elsewhere. We just have not discovered it yet. In terms of within our own solar system, there's a lot of interest. I talked about ocean worlds, right? So places like Europa, Enceladus. So Europa is the moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus is one of the moons of Saturn. And they both have these huge ice layers. But inside, we believe that they might have subsurface oceans. So one of the fields of astrobiology, a community of people are thinking about, could there be life in that subsurface ocean, right? Because, you know, they think about water, they think about chemical disequilibria, and they think about like energy sources when they start thinking about life. So could this be one of those environments? And in the context of that environment, they think it might potentially be microbial life. For example, if there are hydrothermal vents like exist on Earth's ocean, so deep on the subsurface, right? In those hydrothermal vents, they have communities of microbes that don't do photosynthesis, they do chemosynthesis, and they survive in these environments, right? So is there something similar on these ocean worlds? We don't know, right? We need to send future missions. We need to keep on thinking. So in our solar system, if we find something, it's likely going to be microbial, because if it was intelligent, how come it hasn't communicated with us yet, right? But beyond on the exoplanets, I don't know, right? It's very fascinating. And I think, so the community that is formally thinking about this is called the SETI community, so the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And they also use a lot of radio telescopes to look for radio signals from distant galaxies, right? To see if there's some kind of, I don't know, repeating patterns that might be sent from intelligent life forms. So there are scientific endeavors to think about these questions.
Yeah, and this is a very interesting question. And everybody, for now, at least where we are, they have their own opinions and thoughts and ideas, but there is no proof until now, at least until this point, but hopefully in the future. So what do you think, as we continue to talk about this, expansion us as humans into different planets, just like the closest one that we have, and, doable kind of, faster than anything is Moon or Mars. So do you believe, just from your personal experience being in Russia, and you talking about being kind of very isolated from and having that feeling, do you think people psychologically, as I'm going like further with that, like talking about the space tourism and kind of, habitable, cities on Mars. So do you think we as people are ready for the change psychologically?
That's such a wonderful question. I think there's two things I want to add here. Firstly, thanks to the COVID experiment, I think unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of people have become trained in some ways to deal with isolation. It's pretty unfortunate, but humans are pretty resilient, Secondly, I would like to say though that it is one of those things that does not get acknowledged much. Like people often can see physical pain or physical suffering, but mental and psychological issues are often not seen. And I feel like the pandemic has been hugely, like it's had a huge toll on people in that capacity. Even when they screen astronauts, right? They think about, they do psychological screening, because you have to think about being up there in the ISS, only a few people away from family. So definitely it's a heavy factor that is already thought about in these professional astronaut screening campaigns, right? And it's one of the most important things, because you can't see it. You can only predict it from past experience and the way people respond and the way they react to psychological questionnaires. But honestly, it's such a interesting thing, because when you're actually in that situation, how are you going to react? What is your psychological response going to be? And it could really make or break the mission, right? So that's kind of in the context of professional kind of astronautics. But I think you were also talking about space tourism and like humanity as a whole, right? And commercialization moving to these different places. So when I think about companies like Axiom Space trying to do their own commercial, LEO stations, right? I think one of the most important factors they're going to have to think about is, in fact, this, like, how can they create that environment to be the most comfortable, most pleasing, maybe even most Earth-like in the beginning, using perhaps even advanced technologies like VR or AR or things that are ergonomically comfortable, and environments where humans feel like it's luxury, right? Because now it's tourism. So you have to make it a pleasing experience. Like if you put them in a tin can, no one's going to want to go there. No one's going to stay there for long term, like maybe like a week max, right? But if you want to start having longer term stays, you definitely need to start planning it so that it's kind of interesting, because I think humans, like we want to leave Earth, like most of us aspire to go and explore, but there's something so familiar about Earth and its comforts, right? I feel like the longer you're away from that comfort, the harder it will be. So especially as we go deeper into space, we're definitely going to have more advanced technologies where you might have like even closed loop biogenerative, like life support systems. You might have to have like farming communities on these space stations somehow. Like, I don't really know what that's going to look like, but somehow you might have to bring a piece of Earth with you, either physically or emotionally or technologically. Or I was reading in a science fiction book that the deeper you go into space, the more you might lose what it means to be human, right? Because like you're losing that touch with space. Like this sci-fi book, they were literally like light years away, right? So I don't really know. Like as we think about like hundreds of years out, humanity in space, perhaps it changes. Like what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to belong from a planet? Like maybe they no longer associate with Earth. Like this is getting very sci-fi, but maybe if you go really deep into space, you become a spacefaring sort of species that is very different, has a different value system, has different technological sort of capabilities than what we ever dreamt of on Earth.
Yeah. I don't believe this is going too far into sci-fi, because we're already talking about scenario of people being cyborg-like, again, with all this technology and using phones as, this is kind of human body extension these days.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, it feels like, and it looks like we're kind of heading towards that inevitable, you know, place where technology is going to be one with us and we're going to be part of it. So I don't know in what shape or form is that going to be, because we already have like, you know, bionic like extensions of human arms or legs, or where people have no limbs. So, and those things are happening, like, you know, hearts and, you know, organs. So it could be a place that we're going to be, but again, who knows? This is for the future to uncover.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like that you're thinking about that, because I think the most interesting and / scary one for me is Neuralink, right? Like brain computer interfaces, thinking about truly merging the human consciousness and human brain with some kind of technology. Because if you think about space exploration today, the further we go out into the solar system, humans have only been into lower Earth orbit and the moon, right? Everywhere else, we send robotic probes because our biology cannot handle that extended radiation. We need so many life support systems. Humans' biology is not equipped right now to go deep into space. So in fact, yes, I mean, it might sound controversial, but if future space explorers are not just going to be robotic probes and it's going to be some form of humanity really venturing out into extremely deep space, it's probably going to be some kind of human machine hybrid cyborg sort of thing in that future. I don't really know what that's going to look like. Sounds a bit scary to me, but yeah, I guess it might be inevitable, like you said.
Yeah, could be. So we'll see in the near future. So what do you think, again, with all these projects that you're currently working on, and I'm sure you have a lot of great, exciting projects in the near future, maybe it's still too early to ask you in the cycle where you are personally in life, but regardless, what do you feel is your personal legacy or this kind of footprint is going to be in the future? Let's talk about 50 years from now.
Oh my gosh, 50 years. Wow. I always find this question interesting, even when they ask me 5 years, 10 years, but 50 years is a long time. Wow. I've had a pretty winding sort of career. I tend to follow my interests for better or for worse. I very much follow my passions, and I don't always know where it's going to lead me. Right now, I'm very interested in space science, astrobiology. I don't really know exactly what the next step is going to look like at this stage. But I do know that anything I do is going to be something I'm passionate about, that motivates me, that I find exciting. And I think one thing that really stuck with me when I was being mentored by that astronaut actually was, she said, I hope you pay it forward. Like, I'm excited to see your space journey, and I hope you pay it forward and mentor other people in the future too. So if I have a legacy, or if there's something I aspire to do, is to, if I was able to find an industry or a path that I really care about and I'm passionate about, I want to keep on inspiring others to do the same. So I do want to actively mentor people, respond to their questions about how to enter the space sector, and support their journeys as much as I can in my capacity. I would like to keep on inspiring the next generation. So that's the sort of legacy that I hope to have. It's not a very specific function or a sub-segment in space yet, but I just know that I want to really encourage people to pursue their dreams. And the message I want to give is, space is for everyone. I didn't feel that way initially because, you know, you get some rejections. You might not have the citizenship to work in a different country, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other countries out there where you could work. It doesn't mean that if you didn't get a technical degree, you couldn't be working in the space sector, because the industry is shifting so rapidly right now. So that's one of the things I try to tell everyone is, do not think that you don't have a place in this industry. If this is something you're really passionate about and you're willing to take that leap and switch careers or explore opportunities, it's not going to be easy. No, it's always hard. Like, you get rejections and stuff. But if you really are passionate, there really is no boundary. Like, honestly, it can work for you. Go for it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good way to close this podcast by saying, just go for it, guys and girls.
Yeah, go for it.
You have to. And again, Mariam is there available. She's kind of said it, that she wants to help you guys and girls with answering your questions and helping you out, which of course you're going to find LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter in the show notes. So make sure to get in contact with Mariam and ask her questions about, again, some of the things that we covered today, which a lot of it you went into like in depth with those answers, and these are really great. And again, thank you for paying it forward today with you being today on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really nice to speak with you. And, you know, I look forward to staying connected. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, guys and girls, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Again, get in contact with Mariam. And as always, I'll see you next time. So thanks for watching.